Okay,
Here we are.
we're just about there. I don't know why it's taking so long. Okay, here we go.
Great.
Are we?
Says so.
Okay, hi! Welcome to a Mighty Blaze Celebrity Conversation Series. I'm your host, Jane Roper, and today we are having a sure to be amazing conversation with two wonderful ladies of letters, women of letters, I should say. We have Bethanne Patrick here, interviewing Mary Morris, author of the forthcoming memoir, All the Way to the Tigers, which actually, not forthcoming, it came out in June, so it is already here with us in the world. So we're very excited. Yes, so excited to have you both with us today. Thank you for being on A Mighty Blaze. So I will just do some brief introductions and introduce our viewers to you. And then I'm going to turn it over to you guys for your conversation and really just let you take it away because you are far more interesting than I could possibly be. Our viewers who are watching, we hope you'll chime in with comments. We'll be watching. And if you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to ask them in the comments. And if we can, we'll fit them in and present them to our authors today. So welcome. So first, Bethanne Patrick is one of Flavor Wire's 35 writers who run the literary internet. It's pretty impressive. She's a writer. She's a writer, author, and literary critic. On Twitter, she is the book maven. She also created the popular Friday Reads meme for book sharing, which has been around since, how long has that been around?
2009.
Wow. So that's like not long after Twitter began. I mean, that's
basically, I did not invent Twitter.
Oh, okay. All right.
I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a tropical island.
Right. Yes, one would hope. So Bethanne's the author of 3 nonfiction titles, including her most recent, an anthology called The Books That Changed My Life, Reflections from 100 authors, artists, musicians, and other interesting people, and a forthcoming memoir, Life Be. Bethanne is first vice president of DC's Penn Faulkner Board, and she's on the board of 1455 Literary Arts Center in Winchester, Virginia. She reviews books regularly for the Washington Post, NPR Books, the LA Times, and many other publications. Her essays have appeared on Elle.com, BQR.com, The Rumpus, and elsewhere. A graduate of Smith College, Bethanne has a master's degree in English from the University of Virginia. She currently lives in the DC metro area with her family. Welcome, Bethanne.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jane.
Happy to have you here.
Wonderful to be here. Wonderful.
And Mary Morris is the author of an astonishing 16 books, 8 novels, including most recently Gateway to the Moon, 3 collections of short stories, and 4 travel memoirs, including the travel classic Nothing to Declare, Memoirs of a Woman Traveling Alone, which I love, and an anthology of travel literature. Her short stories, articles, and travel essays have appeared in such places as The Atlantic, Narrative, the Paris Review, and the New York Times. Mary is the recipient of a Guggenheim Fellowship, the George W. Perkins Fellowship from Princeton University, and the Rome Prize in Literature. Just a few little things. In 2016, her novel, The Jazz Palace, was awarded the Anisfield Wolf Award for Fiction, which is given to work that addresses the issues of racism and cultural diversity. Her work has been translated into many languages. This June, Mary's 5th travel memoir, All the Way to the Tigers, was published to rave reviews. After a trip to Morocco is derailed by a serious injury and months of recuperation, the author travels to India in search of the world's most elusive apex predator. Her first lesson, don't look for a tiger because you won't find it. You look for signs of a tiger. Morris connects deeply with these magnificent and highly endangered animals, and her weeks on tiger safari also afford a new understanding of herself. New York Times bestselling author Dani Shapiro calls the book brave, layered, complex, and deeply human. And NPR's Maureen Corrigan says, rich and unsparing, Morris's slim memoir is a keeper. Mary currently lives in Brooklyn with her husband and daughter and teaches writing at Sarah Lawrence College. Thank you so much for being with us, Mary. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you, Bethanne, for doing this. This is great.
Absolutely. My honor, my pleasure.
Yes.
So Jane, do you want me to just take it away?
Take it away. Go for it.
Excellent. And I'm going to take it away by first reading a very tiny bit, a few sentences, Mary, from the beginning of your book, because at the end, I'm going to ask you to read another little passage, very, very short. But I love this. As a child, I had a tiger dream, Mary writes. I had it often, and it was always the same. There is a tiger at the foot of my bed. He sits on his haunches, sharpening his claws on my bedposts. I stare at him, his claws extended, focused on his task. He is never in a hurry. His amber eyes are on me. When his claws are sharp, he gets into a crouch, as tigers do. And then he pounces. He springs through the air, and just before he lands on top of me, I wake up. Years later, I learned that you cannot dream your own death, but it never occurred to me that the tiger meant to kill me. He had something else in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, brava. To be a girl who had a dream like that, and then to be able to put it together into a book like this, Mary, that is really an amazing something. So tigers have been with you for a very long time.
A very, very long time. And, you know, it's really interesting about that dream because, of course, everyone has tigers on their mind right now with Joe Exotic and all kinds of tiger stuff. You know, I keep getting things about tigers in the mail. But, you know, that dream really, and in fact, that passage, the way it appears on the page, those words have been in my head many, many years, even decades before I put them down on paper. And I guess I want to say this to all writers out there, like it's a long gestation, you know.
Right.
But, I mean, I think I probably had that dream when I was 4 years old, and I had it on and off till I was about 8.
You know, and as you said, writers, sometimes it's a long gestation. And before we get into the strands that make up this book, because there are several important ones, I want to ask you about what led you to make the trip in the wilds of India. And, you know, you can mention some of the other things yourself or not, but what was the impetus behind finally going all the way to the tigers?
Right. I mean, it's what's, you know, as a writer, of course, words are so impactful to us more than, in some ways, more than actions, or can we separate words from action anyway?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, one of the things in the book is that I had a devastating accident when I was supposed to be going. Basically, I had a year to be a nomad. I had a year off from teaching. I was going to be a nomad. And I had the first day of my sabbatical, I fell and broke my leg. So I never went anywhere for that whole time. And I was thinking about teaching a class, and I have this blog called The Writer and the Wanderer that I haven't been writing in for a while, but anyway, it exists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading a lot of books that I was interested in, stories that happened during journeys. So I was laid up at home. It was Easter Sunday. I was really feeling sorry. I was having a real pity party because my husband works on Sunday. So I was really, truly alone. I would have been in Morocco, but I was not. And I was reading Death in Venice, and I came to the line that he would go on a journey not far, not all the way to the tigers. And I was feeling that sentence just froze me where I was. Not that I could go anywhere anyway,
Right.
but I kept reading it, and I realized it was something that I had to do. And I think my mind even went back to that childhood dream and to lots of other, you know, little elements that are in the book. And I made the decision then that if I could ever walk again, I would go to the tigers.
To the tigers. And, you know, it's interesting too. You mentioned Friday Reads earlier, Jane. And one of the reasons I came up with that is because I was laid up in bed from a broken leg in a car accident. And after that, a few years after that, I broke my ankle. I do really well at fractures. And one of the things that I felt, you know,
You have to write that down.
I do. I do need to write that down. Excuse me. Where's my?
You should write it down. I do very well at fractures. I'll remember.
I promise that I will. And you know, one of the things in the sections about when you are laid up, and this happens after such a an active thing. It's your ice skating, and you love to ice skate, and you're quite good at it. And
Yes,
so
it was.
that's very frustrating to break something when you're, doing something that is graceful, normally.
Right.
And I thought, here's a question, and you can do with it what you will. Is this a book? I know it's a book about travel. I know it's a book about many different things, but is it a book about age or experience or both?
I think it's all those things. And I, I, I mean, okay. Honestly, I never skated again after my accident, not because I didn't want to, but because I don't have the balance. So
Right.
it's not possible. I'm not a really big person to think about age. Both of my parents lived to be 100, so I don't really pay much attention to age. I don't think we should anyway. I think it's overrated, really. But I do think that there are sort of sobering moments that we can go through in our lives. And, I think of the myth of Icarus, where you fly too close to the sun out of hubris. And I think there was a part of me that at that moment when I had my accident, probably I was doing something that at my moment in life I shouldn't have been trying to do. So,
Right.
we have to know our limitations, right? No matter where we are in life, I think.
That is such an interesting thing for you to say, because you go on this journey to India. It's very difficult to actually get your visa, which you detail. And some of that is very frustrating, and some of it's funny, and it's all, very complicated. You're ill when you're on the trip. You have a really bad
I was
flu,
very ill, yeah.
very ill. And you at a couple of points wonder, what am I doing? Why am I doing this at my age alone? Maybe I shouldn't be taking this kind of trip. I'm glad to say, I hope this isn't a spoiler, it works out really well in the end, which makes me very happy. But you did do something that pushed your limits. So my question is, we have to know our limitations, but how do we get to the edge? How do we go all the way to the tigers?
Well, so first of all, I do want to say something about, I think everyone who, I just I tend to put my sort of whining, complaining moments on the page. I think there's a lot of travel writers who I'm awesome and everything's great, and I don't mind sleeping, on the wet ground or whatever. And I just think, forget about it. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, so anyway, I kind of lost the thread of the question, actually. Can you go back, Bethanne, and remind me?
Sure, absolutely. My question is, it's about the limits, because it is important to know ours, but it's also important to test them. You're ill and you go out, you don't see a tiger, you don't see a tiger, you don't see a tiger.
Right.
You're still ill. At any point, you could have said, that's it, I'm going to a luxury hotel in Mumbai and I'm going to forget about this, but you didn't.
Yes.
So
no,
there's a difference between limits and limitations.
Right. I've always liked the challenge. But I will say, and in all my travels, and I've traveled a lot.
Yes.
I've never had anything really bad happen to me. I've never been in a situation I couldn't get out of. I've always known when something wasn't right. And, I just have always kept my radar up. And I think if I really felt I couldn't have finished this trip, I probably wouldn't have finished it, but I knew I could, and I wasn't. But, I think it is important to say, maybe I can't do everything right now. And the fact is, and I say it in the book, and there's a moment where my guide, my wonderful, wonderful guide, and my driver take me to this absolutely beautiful place, and where I want to get out and walk around, and they laugh at me because they think it's the funniest thing they've ever heard, that it's a tiger reserve, I'm supposed to walk around. But, if that had been all that I had experienced, for them to take me to that beautiful place, it would have sufficed. It would have been enough, So it's also appreciating what we're given at a moment. And, to sort of tell a slightly different version of this, I did a book about the Mississippi River a number of years ago. It seems that every travel book I do, there's some catastrophe that happens. And as I was supposed to get on the Mississippi, Katrina happened. And so I was literally on the Mississippi River, stuck in front of a lock and dam for days because there was no river traffic, because the port of New Orleans was closed because of Katrina. And I called my editor and I said, I don't know what to do. I can't go down the Mississippi. And he said, tell me about your father. And it turned into a completely different book, right? So it's like we know our limitations, but we're also not afraid to take a detour or redirect ourselves, or, you can't be stuck to any itinerary, whether it's a travel itinerary or a literary itinerary. I think we have to be free to meander.
I love that, Mary, because we can't also be stuck to a personal itinerary. Things come up, and you and I spoke before today's live event at length about different kinds of travel. There are people who simply want to go and hit the hot spots.
Right.
Want to see the seven wonders of the world, the monuments in Washington, D.C., what have you. But there are other travelers like us. And, I was telling you about a day in Berlin where I just sat in a particular cafe and ate and wrote all day. And that was a travel experience in full for me.
Right.
I know you had experiences like that, not just over the years, but also in this book, as you say, going to this beautiful place, having a moment where you meet or see someone who makes you think differently. Just
Right.
your tales of trying to cross the street
Yes.
in an Indian city, are pretty crazy.
Right.
It's a lot. So
Right.
travel writing very much comes out of the particular. And
Yes.
so tell us all a little bit about some of the moments that didn't make it onto the page for All the Way to the Tigers, but that, you might write about another time, or that were really memorable, or somehow affected you.
So first of all, the first draft of this book was 420 pages long. And I, in fact, I couldn't, no one would publish it. Okay. It was really long and meandering. And it actually covered several journeys, not just the India journey. And it did cover a trip I made later to Morocco, a trip I made alone to Istanbul. I mean, there were other trips that led me up to this India trip.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend Danny Shapiro did me the favor of reading it at 420 pages. And she said, if it's not about the tiger, and it's not about your accident, and it's not about your family, it shouldn't be in the book. And so I honed it down, and I got rid of a ton of material. There was one piece of material that I really didn't want to lose, which was my trip to Varanasi, which happened after I went to the Tigers. The trip extended itself. I went to Calcutta, I went to other places, and it was much longer that I was in India, but I only chose to write about the part that actually had to do with tiger safari. And it was hard for me to lose the part about Varanasi because, first of all, I thought the writing was really good. And second of all, to me, it kind of brought the story together a little bit. It brought it back to my father, who's an important part in the book.
Very important.
But
yes.
My editor, Nan Talith, who is retiring this year after 6 decades as a publisher, and has been my publisher for, dare I say, 4 decades of those.
How wonderful.
Decades. And I've been incredibly, incredibly blessed. She said to me, she said, Mary, I love this book. She said, take out Varanasi. It's a downer. And I was like, well, I don't care. She said, no, it's just a downer, and I was like, all right, whatever, so I think I've got a little essay about the city of the dead, as they call it. So
I want to read that. I definitely do. That sounds fantastic.
Well, if I could share just one thing, because it was really,
please.
It's one of these dark moments. It was so funny. I don't even know what to say, but there are it's funeral pyres, and the Hindus bring their beloved there to be burned on the pyres. So it's very intense. It's not really a tourist attraction.
Right.
But I was there, and I was seeing a very moving event of a young boy sending his father. There are no women there. I mean, I was there in the spectators. But anyway, I felt I needed to leave that moment. And when I turned to leave, there was a family to my left that had their dead father or grandfather propped up on the steps, and they were taking selfies with him. And then I decided to go to my right, and there was a water buffalo standing there. And I found myself wedged literally between a dead body and a water buffalo. And it was, I started laughing. I mean, it was too bizarre. Like, there's a buffalo, and there's people taking pictures with their dead relative. Those kinds of moments. But anyway, some of that didn't make it into the book, but
didn't make it into the book, but definitely into an essay. And again, these are the experiences that not only make travel experiences much more rich and layered, but also allow us to connect them back to other things. And so I definitely want to take some time to talk about the family material in this book, which is, for a book that really is so slim now, it is a book that is slim and accessible. We'll talk about the structure in a few minutes, but it is so rich that I have read it almost 3 times now. And, because I really do prepare for these things. And each time there is material that jumps out at me. There is a great deal in your parents. They were extremely complicated people. And it sounds as if, I mean, I don't know, they gave you so much, Mary, but they also demanded so much of you and of each other.
right.
What now, having written this, they're like tigers circling, aren't they?
They were, and there's also a passage in the book where people say I'm very brave, and one of the things that I say in the book is that I don't feel brave at all. I feel much safer in the jungle or
Yes.
wherever I am than I ever felt at home. So not that they were monsters, but I just getting out of the house, anyway.
No, but it's true. I mean, and each of them, in their way, gave you something towards your life as a traveler. Your father, gave you your passport when you left for your junior year abroad. And then some years earlier, when you were a teenager, your mother took you on this sort of grand tour of Europe sort of trip.
Right. My father gave me my journal. My father gave me my journal. That's fine. No, because, and my mother took me on a world tour. She actually she didn't kidnap me because I was her daughter. But I had no choice to do this summer travel with her.
You had other things that you were interested in doing that summer. You had a young Irish lad that
I had a lad, and I wanted to take touch typing, and instead I found myself like on buses with my mother, going from Rome to Florence, and watching her wash her feet in the bidets in Paris, and just utterly. My mother was like Auntie Mame. I mean, it was literally like being with probably nobody knows who Auntie Mame is, but anyway.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we do.
Okay, good. Okay. My mother was very much that kind of, over the top person and a very big personality, but she wasn't the easiest person to have as your mother.
And there's a couple of scenes from that trip that I will not spoil because they're just so powerful. But also the way you talk about your father is very powerful because, as you said a few minutes ago, leaving home was a good thing. I mean, he was a deaf man who was also large and it sounds like very angry and very frustrated. So much of his anxiety about hearing was taken out on his family.
Yeah, I mean, he roared. My father roared all the time. Yeah. And so, I mean, they were very complicated people, but they were also very, very artistic people. And I know I shared this with you yesterday, but can I quickly tell about the suppressed desire ball that?
Oh yes, please. That's a wonderful story.
So it's in Nothing to Declare, and I'm sure it may even be in this book. I don't remember. I've written about it before, but it's not in this book. Okay, good. Thank you. I haven't read it recently, my own book. But when I was a young girl, my parents were invited to a suppressed desire ball, and you were to go as your secret wish. And my mother, who was I'll truncate this, very gifted seamstress, made herself a costume of the world because she never could go anywhere. And my very handsome bald father got a wig from his barber and went as a man with hair. And he actually won first prize. But I remember my mother in this costume she had made with a globe on her head and these flowing skirts that were the seas and the Taj Mahal and the Great Wall of China. And I can still see her at the top of the stairs. And it was like, and I knew she wanted to see the world. And and my mother was a woman who was held back by the circumstances. She probably would have been a fashion designer. She would have been like Donna Karan or something like that. I mean, she was an incredible eye and seamstress. And so anyway, it was all about that moment in time. But I think that, like the tiger at the foot of my bed, I think that moment with my mother really made me a traveler in some way. made me want to see the
That's
world that my mother
really,
couldn't see. Yes.
yes. And when she does take you to Europe, one of the things she says is going to stick with me, which is that she says, I've only been to Idaho and I hated it.
And she did. I can vouch for that. She was like, oh
just,
God, we're in the West now.
yeah. Now, one of the things, again, before we get into the book structure, so much to talk about, I did want to talk about is the tiger is a lone creature. The
Yes.
tiger, as you note, there is no word for a group of tigers. We don't, it's not a pod, it's not a herd, it's not a murder of crows. The tiger is very solitary. And you do talk about how people think writing is a lonely job, but those of us who are writers, when we're writing, we're not lonely at all. It's entirely engrossing. And I wanted to hear you talk about learning more about tigers and their behavior and how this, which seems like the most natural metaphor in the world.
Right. I mean, so when I began thinking about tigers, they were literal tigers. But the more I learned about them, the more I identified with them as a writer and as a woman and as an artist. I want to say something about a question that someone asked me a little on another event. It's what's the difference between loneliness and solitude?
Right.
And I said loneliness is a choice, and solitude is solitude is a choice. Loneliness is a state that, right? And I think as a writer, I choose solitude for my work because I love to do my work. I don't want to like be alone in here forever, but I do. I love it. And so tigers are solitary apex predators. And one of the things that I learned very quickly when I was in India, so my guide, whenever he thought there was a tiger, he would say, oh, she's out there. We couldn't see anything, but he always said she. So I said to him, like, what's the deal with she? And he said, all unseen tigers are she. And then I was a goner. You know what I mean? This solitary, elusive, mysterious creature who's a woman, is female, as an unseen creature. And, I'm a writer and, I love my solitude. There's no flock of me or you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And obviously we're avoiding crowds right now, so we're not doing that. So, they became a rich metaphor for me, but also they are incredibly fascinating creatures. And I think one of the reasons that we're so drawn to them now is that in some ways they are the last truly wild thing. Not that there aren't wild things out there, but a male tiger requires 100 square kilometers of territory. Now, who's going to give somebody 100 square kilometers these days?
Right.
Habitats are being destroyed. I mean, that's why these animals are disappearing in the wild. There are thousands in private collections, thousands. But the wild, so they represent this kind of wildness, and, they became more and more important to me. And they're beautiful.
They are, well, and they are beautiful. And I wanted to talk about a couple of things about tigers, and then go into, as I said, a little bit more about the structure of the book. Tigers, I learned from your book, have completely different stripes, all of them. And they are identified by the guides, by their stripes.
Yeah.
But along with that, they have one thing that is the same on all of them. And you were explaining it earlier. It's the blaze on their forehead. So show us.
Right. So again, I'm not a scientist. This is anecdotal information. Okay. But so every tiger essentially has a blaze that begins like this. So it's kind of a straight line and then a couple lines like that. And they all have that marking. Everything else is unique. But that is also the Chinese character for emperor.
So cool.
Yeah. I think I got that from John Valiant's book, The Tiger. So
really interesting that they would all have that one thing that marks them as
Right.
members, they may not be living in groups, but they are the same species.
Yes.
Yeah.
Unless they do what we do here, which is you throw different species of tigers together, and there used to be a lot, and then you destroy the gene. So, but
Right.
yes, they are unique, and it's true that the guides identify them. Their stripes are like fingerprints,
Mhm.
and a good guide knows every tiger by his or her stripes.
I did see on your blog a picture of you with tigers. Was that at a preserve or a safety, a tiger rehabilitation facility? Or...
So before I reached a state of consciousness about all of this, um, I did go to Thailand and did go to one of those. I mean, I was fascinated with tigers, and literally we were driving on the highway and it said Tiger Kingdom. And I just said to Larry, I want to
I want
stop.
to go see the tigers.
I just go. And so, yeah, yes, it was a place where you can go and be with them. But of course, now that many of us, millions of people have seen Joe Exotic, and now that I understand what happens to these tigers and this kind of petting zoo thing, it's definitely not something that I am even, I
You
don't
wouldn't
condone
do
it. No,
you
I wouldn't
wouldn't do
condone
it
it now.
again,
But I have to say, it was fascinating.
that's what I was going to say. It must have been incredible, given how long tigers have fascinated you, to finally be close and see,
Right.
the incredible power that they have.
Right.
And also, it sounds, one of the things you say in the book, they hold grudges. They have real
They
personality.
do. They hold grudges. Well, that's John Valiant's book, The Tiger,
Mhm.
which is an incredible book. It's about a specific Siberian tiger that seeks revenge on a specific man, and the man
Mhm.
knows that the tiger is looking for him, and that's on the first page of the book. So I'm not giving anything
Right.
away.
That's,
But they're highly intelligent. They, you know, they're yeah, they're very incredible creatures. I mean,
they,
as Jean Martel says in The Life of Pi, it's not going to be your friend. I mean, I wouldn't snuggle up to one, although Sarah Bernhardt did used to walk around with one on a leash to distract people from the fact that she was Jewish, or that's what people said. That she figured if she walked around with a tiger, people would forget that she was a Jewish actress.
people would
I guess
forget a
we could
lot.
try it. I
Yes.
don't know.
One technique, I guess. Bethanne, I think you were going to ask something about the structure of the book, right? I would love to
Yes.
hear some about that.
Absolutely. And that is something, Jane, you and I talked about a bit yesterday. So I'm going to ask you to go over this for our viewers again. But what occurred to me as I was reading it, I loved the fact that there were chapters of all different lengths, some of them mere sentences, some of them a few paragraphs, some long stories. And when I mentioned that, you immediately said, well, there's a reason for it. So
Right. So here's the reason, and I'm happy to share this because I keep waiting for a reviewer to pick up on it, but nobody seems to figure this out. So I will share this happily. There was a moment where I decided that if this was going to be a slim volume, which is what I wanted after a certain point, I wanted the book to be a tiger. I don't know how that decision came to me, but once I realized I wanted it to be a tiger, then I knew I had to have an even number of chapters because a tiger is a Rorschach test. So a tiger has exactly the same stripes on one side as the other. Okay, so it had to be even. So there are 112 chapters. And at one point I had 113 chapters, and I just about like went crazy getting it to 112. It had to be that. And then the short little chapters for me are stripes. So those are like the tiger stripes. And once I got that structure in my head, it started to really take shape for me. The other thing I want to mention, just in terms of craft, because there are at least two time frames in the book. There's childhood, there's my broken ankle in 2008, there's the trip, and then there's all the little tiger passages. And when I was putting the book together, I print each of those different layers, threads on different color paper, so that childhood might be blue and my broken ankle might be white and tiger might be yellow, and then tiger facts might be green. I think tiger was, I don't remember how it went, but then I lay it out on a table and I go, oh, I've got too much yellow, or it becomes a visual something for me. You need a big table.
Yes, yes, you do.
Yeah. Well, so Larry and I, we do house swaps, and we did this house swap to this crazy place in Italy a few years ago when I was working on the book. And I had all of these chapters and pieces, and I couldn't figure it out. And I had all these keys. And one day I walked in, there were these rooms in this place we were staying. And I walked in and there was a big game room and there was a ping pong table. And it was like 5 a.m. and I started taking the net off, and Larry came down and goes, oh my God, a ping pong table. That's awesome. Don't take the net off. We need to play. And I said, no, we're not going to play ping pong. I'm using this table. And I lay all the pieces out and I looked at the different colors. So that was also a way that I structured it.
I'm so sorry about my telephone. So
oh, I didn't even heir it because I was going on.
So that's why I'm looking.
Zoom moment. You got to have.
Yes, exactly.
We're all having,
yeah, we all have them.
Zoomabilia here.
Zoomabilia. It is, you know, and the other interesting thing about this to me in terms of craft is that, for example, the Jazz Palace took a long time for you to write. It was complicated. It was, dare I say, epic. This, I'm sure, took its own time. It's not that I'm saying something shorter takes less time, but it's just so different. It's so different to lay out and structure and map something like this. And how long did it take before you got to that point where you realized
years, literally. Yeah. But I mean, the Jazz Palace took 17 years. The Jazz Palace started as an 800-page first draft, and it's a 250-page novel. So I kind of render, everything kind of gets like sauce. It just gets cooked down for me. So it's just a process that I seem to have to go through, which is to kind of, I sort of make a mess and then I have to kind of figure out how to straighten it up, I guess.
Boil it down,
boil it down. Exactly.
You know, and that's what really struck me while I was reading all the way to the Tigers, is everything that is here is essential to the story. And as I mentioned, I've read it now more than once. And what was interesting about that is you have some passages that have quite a bit of information, especially the frustrating travel information. You know, you're sick, there isn't hot water, you know, in your room, something's cold, but all of that is essential information too. So it's not just a matter of finding something pithy and throwing it on the page. And I think that's something that readers or writers who are starting out might think, well, I found this factoid, so this is the way it works. But the longer passages have their purpose and they're just as carefully plotted. Isn't that so?
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, yes, it is so. And, you know, with each of these 112 pieces, I think of them as, I mean, I worked really long on the language and simplifying and boiling it down, rendering these passages. You know, it's sort of closer to poetry, I think, in that way than narrative per se. It's a kind of blend of poetry and narrative. Yeah.
That makes me think, and we don't have to, you know, get into this deeply because it could be discussed, you know, for hours. But do you think all the way to the Tigers, do you think any of your writing stands as more female or feminine, or and it doesn't have to be traditionally so, but is outside of the kind of narrative linearity that many of us, you know, grew up with in various classes, whether it's high school, college, graduate school?
Well, I mean, first of all, in terms of the feminine quality, and I don't mind embracing that, you know, that was, a decision I made, especially when I started to write about travel. You know, I think I told you this anecdote yesterday, and I don't think we have time to go into it exactly, but when I decided to write about travel, I felt that as a woman I moved through the world differently than men.
Right.
And that I move through the world, again, I don't want to pigeonhole that men are not or whatever, but I read a lot of travel books by men when I decided to write Nothing to Declare, because really, truthfully, there really weren't travel books written by women, and very much. I mean, the British ladies, you know, and all that, but there wasn't,
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't right. But anyway, I felt that as a woman, the dangers I faced and my own inner journey and outer journey was how I wanted that, you know, my emotional reality with the reality that I was connecting with in the world. So if that makes it feminine, I embrace that, because that's, you know, I'm not afraid to put myself on the page, you know.
Right. And you're not. And I know we are just about time to wrap up here, but I wanted to mention, I don't know if we have time, Jane, but I had read a little piece from the beginning of the book about tigers. And at the end of the book, Mary has this beautiful, I don't know when, I think you said it's written in 1974, the poem about the tiger.
Oh, my poem. Yes.
Yes. And I was wondering, do we have time for Mary to read just a few lines?
Sure.
Of it? So this is a poem from when you were, you know, beginning to really write travel writing and really wending your way into the world as an adult and as a writer.
I mean, truth be told, Jane, this I wrote in graduate school before I'd even thought about doing anything. It just was a poem, and if I could find it, I'd happily read a line. Give me a minute here.
It's very close to the end.
While you're
the number, you know, the chapter number.
Oh, here we go. Let's see if we can. But in the meantime, do we have any questions?
I don't, you know what? I don't know if we have any questions, but I'm going to take a moment to mention the bookstores that you guys.
Good, please.
Let's do that, and I'll try to find this.
Yeah, so we hope, of course, that you will pick up Mary's memoir, All the Way to the Tigers, and one of her favorite bookstores too that she wanted to give a shout out to were Greenlight Books and Community Bookstore, both in Brooklyn, where she is from.
Yes.
And let's see. Also, you can also check out one of Bethanne Patrick's hometown favorites, One More Page Books, right? And that is, I'm sorry, where is it again?
Arlington, Virginia.
Arlington, Virginia.
Holla. Page 212, Mary.
I got it.
Great.
It'll take about a minute and a half to read. Do I have that?
Yeah, sure. Go.
Okay. So this is a poem I wrote in 1974 to the tiger who sleeps at the foot of my bed, which is based on the dream I had. Every night as I crawl into bed, I have to be careful not to disturb the tiger who sleeps at the foot of my bed. He is a fat yellow tiger with black stripes, 3-inch canines, whiskers for radar that detect my slightest move. He is luminous as an alarm clock, glowing on the bedstand in the dark. As I sleep, I must never rustle the sheets or rise before he rises. If he prowls, I close my eyes. The prowler hates the voyeur. Once when I was a child, I kicked him in my sleep and he rose from beneath the bed and pounced on me as I lay on my back. Since that night, we've grown used to one another. We have lived without mishap. Always hungry, he lies curled at the foot of the bed, sharpening his claws on the posts, and I am careful not to disturb him, for he has threatened to go away.
Amazing. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to read that.
Thank you so
much, Mary, and thank you, Bethanne. This has been amazing. I feel like we could just go on all afternoon.
I know.
So, on behalf of all of us at the Mighty Blaze, thank you so much for being here. We really are glad to have you, and best of luck with the book.
Thank you.
Thanks, Blazers.
Okay, got it. All right. So long, everyone.